Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, coming your way live on a Wednesday afternoon. It's 1 o'clock Eastern time. We did not plan to do a live stream necessarily this afternoon, maybe tonight, to talk college football, preview the 2018 season, talk about our previews and predictions that are upcoming, discuss our schedule rankings that we're in the midst of releasing right now, 70 all the way up to number 1. We have just released a Vanderbilt at number 50, number 13 in the SEC. And of course, our various team reports that you can find on my YouTube channel, Mark Rogers TV, and the audio versions at Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. All right. Would also like to remind everyone that as I mentioned during the live stream from 2 nights ago, that we've got a phone line, at least for the next week. I'm going to try out this particular phone line from Phone Burner. The number is 860-400-5696. That's 860-400-5696. So if you would like to make a call into the show, during the show, not after the show, but during the show, while we are doing the live stream, I will certainly take calls from anyone and everyone talking college football. So I leave it wide open to talk college football, but the reason I'm striking up the live stream is the news that's breaking concerning Urban Meyer and his knowledge of Zach Smith's transgressions against his wife and the domestic violence that ensued starting in 2009 when Smith was on Urban Meyer's staff at Florida. Now, we talked to Steve Hellwagon last week from 247 Sports about this incident that was released in regards to the latest occurrence that required a restraining order and protection for the young lady, Zach Smith's wife, or former wife, just recently, and that was addressed at Big Ten Media Days. What was not addressed necessarily was the possibility that Urban Meyer knew of previous issues. There was one in 2009 in which Urban Meyer did say that at that point they were newly married, that he was going to help with counseling and set up a counseling session and series of sessions between Zach Smith and his wife, and then continue from there. That it was a situation that he wanted to keep under wraps and he wanted to keep out of the public spotlight. At that point, obviously, the records are public, and that nothing had happened, seemingly, that we knew about from 2009 up until this latest incident. But text messages are found. Brett McMurphy of ESPN is the guy that originally released this story and uncovered this story. So let's go to the original source with Brett McMurphy in regards to everything else being reported that you see from Saturday Down South, from CBS Sports, from SB Nation, and a host of online sports outlets are derived from the original work by Brett McMurphy. So I would like to read one of the versions here from Sporting News, and so we can dive into it further. The ramifications on the football field could be immense, of course. And that's what we typically deal with here at Mark Rogers TV. The social aspect, the political aspect of sports certainly interferes at times with what we want to talk about on a regular basis here, which are the games and the analysis of the football on the field. But with the misgivings of coaches and players and administrators, this is often the topic, and it can't be ignored and it has to be addressed, especially since it could cost Urban Meyer his job. I would expect that Ohio State would go to great lengths to protect Urban Meyer and his status as Ohio State football coach. But if it's just way beyond the aspect at which the public outcry would be too great, and the possible avoidance and the neglect concerning this incident and past incidents, that it would become like the Jim Tressel situation, in which Jim Tressel didn't overtly do anything wrong. He was not taking part in any infractions legally or against the NCAA, but he had knowledge thereof and therefore ignored it, covered it up, and did not report it. And that cost Jim Tressel his job, despite the great success he had at Ohio State. And he was coming off a team that went 12-1, top 3 in the nation. So I'm going to read this from Sporting News, then I'm going to look at the live chat. It being a Wednesday afternoon, I don't know how many we'll have on the live chat, but of course, this is a very important matter. I was in the midst of going through the Big 12 in my previews and predictions and studying personnel and rosters for, let's see, Iowa State and Kansas State and Texas Tech and Baylor today. But Urban Meyer, one of the winningest coaches in the history of college football, under scrutiny right now. All right, so this is from the Sporting News. And again, Brett McMurphy of ESPN, the first to report this. Text messages obtained by college football reporter Brett McMurphy appear to show that Ohio State head coach Urban Meyer likely was aware of multiple alleged domestic violence incidents involving a former assistant coach, incidents Meyer denied any knowledge of just last week at Big Ten Media Days. Courtney Smith, ex-wife of fired Ohio State assistant coach Zach Smith, revealed text messages between her and the wives of several other Ohio State coaches, including Shelley Meyer, detailing the alleged abusive nature of her former husband. All the coaches' wives knew, Courtney Smith told McMurphy. They all did, every single one. Text messages with Shelley Meyer appear to show that Courtney Smith routinely claimed that her husband's behavior was abusive. Quote, Shelley said she was going to have to tell Urban, Courtney Smith told McMurphy. I said, that's fine. You should tell Urban. I know Shelley did everything she could, end quote. In an interview with Stadium, Courtney Smith said Shelley Smith never came back to her to tell her she discussed Zach Smith's actions with Urban Meyer. A text exchange in November of 2015 between Courtney Smith and Lindsay Voltolina, the wife of Ohio State staffer Brian Voltolini, revealed that Urban Meyer had talked to Zach Smith about his alleged incidents. Meyer fired Zach Smith on July 23rd, shortly after McMurphy originally reported the 2015 allegations of domestic violence and felonious assault. Meyer said he would have fired Smith in 2015 had he known of the incidents that were investigated. No charges were filed by the Powell, Ohio Police Department. That's where it gets damaging and damning for Urban Meyer, if true. Courtney Smith shared photos of purporting to show herself with bruises on her neck and arms and a bloodied hand from an alleged encounter with her husband. She filed for divorce in November of 2015 and filed a domestic violence protection order against Zach Smith on July 20th, 3 days before his firing and 4 days before Urban Meyer's appearance at Big Ten Media Days. All right, so we have a situation in which Urban Meyer had Zach Smith on his staff in Florida in 2009, and there were issues there, and those were reported, and Urban Meyer addressed those with the public and how he was handling the situation. Then we had no necessarily that I know of, correct me if I'm wrong, anything that Urban Meyer has spoken to regarding Zach Smith and these incidents all the way up to Big Ten Media Days a week ago. Then, of course, Brett McMurphy reveals the story, uncovers the incident from 2015, in which I also believe that there was a protection order sent out recently. So Urban Meyer makes the statement at Big Ten Media Days that Zach Smith is fired. He hated to do it. He had a number of misgivings about it, but that he had to do it and that the incident was too great to ignore. But he had no knowledge of the incidents in 2015. That's what comes under scrutiny here, and that's what may prove to be the undoing of Urban Meyer's tenure at Ohio State would be almost 3 years ago. So in November of 2015, at the conclusion of that 2015 season, these incidents came into play. There were text messages shared between Courtney Smith, Zach Smith's wife, and apparently a number of Ohio State assistant coaches' wives, including Shelley Meyer, Urban Meyer's wife. All right, let's see what we've got on the live chat, and we will go from there, because I think this situation, if proven, which obviously the conversations between Urban Meyer and his wife, Shelley, cannot be proven, but there is a level of assumption that if Shelley Meyer knew of incidents, that she would share those with her husband, especially if she told Courtney Smith through those text messages that she would share them with Urban Meyer. That's a smoking gun right there. All right, let's see what you guys have on the live chat. When are we firing up the live stream? Here it is. When Ohio State fires Urban Meyer, about 5 minutes from now. Mike Escobar joining the show as well. Appreciate you joining Mike as well. Let's see where we get to the real comments. Nate Howell, OSU will never fire Urban. They didn't fire Tressel. They'll never bury Urban. Sad, but that's the reality about some universities. Okay, well, if we want to go into the technicalities of a firing versus somebody resigning, terminating their own position, that's grammatics. That's a technicality there. Jim Tressel was fired at Ohio State. He would not have left the job at Ohio State. We all know that. So yes, don't believe that anybody is above this or any situation in college athletics, as we have seen in the last 10 years. We've seen it on a number of levels, Joe Paterno being one in particular. That being even graver, more grave of a situation. I hate to ask this question, Mark. Do you think Urban keeps his job? Okay, based on what I just read, NCIS Fanatic 21, and basically, aside from our conversation with Steve Hillwagon on 247 Sports last week, and at that point, it was, okay, Brett McMurphy has reported this, Urban Meyer says that, so it's not a good situation, doesn't look good for Urban Meyer in regards to his relationship with Zach Smith and his tolerance for that type of behavior. But he apparently says, well, he does say, and apparently we got to take him at his word until something else is reported or investigated and uncovered, that Urban Meyer had no knowledge of the 2015 incident, fires the coach, done deal, we move on. That's what we had at that point. But we did speculate, Steve and I, at that point, that typically when there are these type of incidents that are investigated and reported and uncovered, that days later, weeks later, we then find out how much was known by the parties involved. And it's typically more than was initially reported and admitted to. So that's where we find the difficult place for Urban Meyer in keeping his job at Ohio State. Yeah, if BK got fired for every rape he knew about at ND, he would be long gone. Okay, we'll not deal into speculation right now. Let's focus. Loyalty problem based on, that evidence right there. So Jim Tressel was in the same situation. Certainly the issues were nowhere near this. I'm not comparing issues of getting tattoos and trading them for memorabilia and for awards versus domestic abuse. Not making that comparison. The comparison I'm making is covering up a situation and not reporting it. So for Jim Tressel, we're talking about athletes that many of us would argue have the right to take the awards that they've earned and trade them for whatever property they would like. In this case, it was tattoos. Jim Tressel, that being an NCAA violation, knew of it. There was a paper trail, emails, and he covered it up. He just let it go and dismissed it, and he lost his job. That's the parallel and the correlation to the Urban Meyer situation. And of course, what Urban Meyer's covering up far, 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 far more egregious, important, severe than what Jim Tressel covered up. Unfortunately, and I'm not going to dive into the Jim Tressel case because it's not at hand right now, but it's just that exact comparison of covering up or ignoring, looking the other way, is that Jim Tressel, many would consider to have been loyal to his players and in basically not turning them in to lose their eligibility, being loyal to Terrell Pryor, Boom Herron, DeVere Posey, and others at the time. So there's almost a credibility factor in the positive light for Jim Tressel. I don't believe that he was doing it for selfish or self-centered reasons, because basically he could have handed in those players. Sure, he's not going to have as good a football team in 2011, but he's the head coach at Ohio State. He's winning 11 and 12 games a year. He's going to national championship games. He's winning Big Ten titles. He takes a dip to 8-4 one year, and then he's back at it. So on the surface, my belief is that Jim Tressel did it based on loyalty to the players. Urban Meyer obviously did this based on loyalty to Zach Smith, but it was misguided loyalty, at least it appears. All right. Nate, he was loyal in keeping that information private. Urban Meyer needs to go, says J.R. Thurman. Michigan and Miami will need a new coach after the opener. Okay, let's stay focused. Jim Harbaugh not going nowhere. Colton Hawthorne, he has to go. This is unacceptable. Volunteer Roadshow, appreciate you jumping on board. Appreciate everyone joining us. Of course, the late notice. I just struck up the live stream because of the issues here and the weight of the coach with the third winningest record in the history of college football on the ropes at one of the blue blood programs at Ohio State. If this happens elsewhere, based on my coverage of college football and what I try to report and try to cover in regards to analysis, if this happens at Boise State or Oregon State, I'm still on here and we're still discussing it. But it becomes even more severe and more important from a football aspect when it's Ohio State or Michigan or Alabama or Penn State, as it was 7 years ago, as it was at Baylor. Not as important, but considering the transgressions, extremely severe. All right. Navy Thomas coming in with a different opinion, which I like here off the cuff. I'm going to read through. This is flat out BS, holding the coach accountable for what his underlings did while Urban was not there. What is he supposed to do? Hold hands with all 300 or so underlings that work for him. But once he has knowledge, he has knowledge. He has knowledge of transgressions against his wife, domestic violence. I'm not getting around that part of it. That one's difficult for me to dismiss. Yes, Navy Thomas 8, in this hypersensitive world, I believe that, number one, we don't have enough grace for people, and maybe I shouldn't take it down this path because I don't want to misrepresent myself, because I don't want to discount the severity of the discretions. They are through the roof. But the court of public opinion sways these kind of decisions way too much. We see people getting kicked out of broadcasting jobs and people being kicked off the internet and people being put into certain places from a social status and from a job status, and losing employment because of an allegation that's not even substantiated, because it hits one of the red button areas. And the court of public opinion says that person's a bad person, get them out. And we've seen it all over the place. We see it in college athletics when there is an incident involving a player. Even before it's tried, they're kicked off the team. And then we see it in the case of the court of public opinion, because advertising money says we are no longer going to back this person. Therefore, then the employer of that person boots them even before the case is settled and before we get to the truth. And they are fairly tried. Number one ND fan, if someone told you they were being held hostage by gunpoint and you don't do anything, it's partially your fault. Nate, just like MSU got stronger with Michigan was down, this may be the rise of Harbaugh. Nate, how wishful thinking. Even if Ohio State went down, Michigan is third in line in the Big Ten East. If D'Antonio hasn't been fired, Urban's fine. And Jimmy isn't going anywhere unless he gets fired. This is the dream job. Okay. Big distinction here between D'Antonio and Meyer is not the severity of the transgressions, but D'Antonio, widespread issue, couldn't be pinpointed in any one direction. There was no specific email, text evidence to point D'Antonio to having knowledge. Versus Urban Meyer, this is a one-shot deal. He's in charge of the football program. One of his assistant coaches has made these number of transgressions, and Urban Meyer, it is proven apparently that he had knowledge. Bam. He's one guy. He's in charge. He had knowledge. He didn't do anything about it. D'Antonio, this is football. It's basketball. It's other sports. There's no paper trail back to D'Antonio specifically. It's just he's in the program. He should know better what's going on. He should know the culture. He's part of the culture. He determines the culture. So it's more vague, and he looks bad being part of a situation and being at the top of the power structure of a culture that allows that type of behavior. So that's the situation with D'Antonio. It's more vague. It's more general in regards to him being at the top. With Tom Izzo in regards to public eye, public image, and what's the culture at Michigan State athletically in the athletic department. It's really bad, and Mark D'Antonio is near the top. That looks bad, but there's no direct correlation. There's no direct line in terms of evidence back to Mark D'Antonio. Urban Meyer, there's a straight line. As long as Shelley Meyer talks to her husband about such issues, especially when she tells Courtney Smith, Zach Smith's ex-wife, that I'm telling my husband, and that's on a text message, then that's a direct line. Michigan State and Penn State are on a higher level than Michigan. All right, dream job. Yes, we're talking Harbaugh again. Okay, guys, let's take turns holding Mark's hand so he does not do anything to get fired off his live streams. Navy Thomas, you know the workings of the internet and the power brokers that be on those companies that seem to rule the stock exchange these days, the likes of Google and others, as well as I do, if not better. That's an apropos comment. Actually, we have no idea what gets streamed where or what gets taken off of people's feeds, or what gets misdirected or directed in another way, or who gets pulled off of where because of what they say. It happens way too often. We only knew that Urban's wife knew. We don't know for sure that Urban knew. Each side seems suspicious. If he knew everything, he should absolutely be fired. Buckeye State Sports. So there's the correlation right there. That's the connection I just made. Buckeye State Sports. Shelley Meyer knew based on text messages. If I read that correctly, she told Courtney Smith, Zach's wife at the time, that she was going to report this to Urban and talk to him. I shouldn't call it a report. Speak to her husband about it. Now, maybe it can't be proven. It's like a smoking gun. The guy standing there, we don't know that he shot the gun, but the gun's at his feet and it's just been fired. It looks awfully bad. Jinker GM, especially in the Me Too era, it's going to be hard to get out of it. I lost my train of thought. Do you think Ohio State would be in probation again? This is a one-man deal, apparently. Dulani, I hope I got that right. This is a one-man deal, apparently, although the coaching staff apparently had knowledge as well, but they're not going to be taken to task like Urban Meyer, who's in charge, who had authority over his coach, as opposed to the other assistant coaches who could have blown the whistle on him, but they would be reporting someone on their same level. So it all comes back to Urban Meyer. I would not expect necessarily, if Ohio State fires Urban Meyer, that Ohio State would take a huge hit for this. I don't believe so. At least Meyer should be fined and suspended for 3 games. So Colton, you bring up an interesting discipline right there, because we are talking strictly either or. Keeps his job, the evidence can't be completely substantiated, or smoking gun, loses his job. 3 games suspension. Interesting if that held true. It's an interesting thought, though. Colton, if he did it, he should be fired. It's either all or nothing, no minor stuff. Well, it's certainly not a minor issue. So, number one, ND fan, you nailed that on the head. This is not, okay, there's a recruiting violation here that's kind of sketchy, and the head coach should have known, and there was some really bad stuff going on, but we can't directly tie him. But based on all the connectors, he probably knew, but we don't know for sure, and it's recruiting. This is going to be one of those issues that it goes beyond at the NCAA, and it goes to legal and is a legal matter. Therefore, that's where it becomes extremely severe. Fill in, suspend him for the Michigan game. It's like a bye week. All right. Every time I move this live stream, it moves the live chat all over the place. Buckeye State Sports, look up the interview with Courtney. Shelley said she'd tell Urban when asked if she was ever told by Shelley that she did tell Urban. She replied she did not. Okay, when asked if she was ever told by Shelley, okay, that she did tell Urban, she replied she did not. Yeah, so that's what we just read in the Sporting News article, is that Shelley Meyer said she would tell Urban. She didn't necessarily tell him, although that seems a bit strange if Courtney Smith is confiding in all these coaches' wives, and including Shelley Meyer. And based on what we read in Sporting News, that she would tell her, but Buckeye State Sports is letting us know in the actual video interview, which I have yet to watch, that there wasn't verification that she did tell Urban Meyer. Rodney Cook, what the heck was Urban thinking? You know, I don't know. Go back to the Tressel situation. I've got to think that his loyalty to his players won out, because if he turns in the players, even though they are 3 of his best offensive players and 5 total players, and he takes a bit of a hit in regards to winning one season. He's the head coach at Ohio State. He's winning like a madman. He's going to championship games. He's winning the Big Ten. He's going to go 8-4 one year, and then the train keeps rolling. Maybe he still goes 10-2 or 11-1, and the train keeps rolling. At worst, he loses 4 games. The train keeps rolling. So the motivation had to be, I want to protect my players and keep them eligible, not for my sake, but for their sake. For Urban Meyer, unless he just didn't think that he would get caught for sure. But in this day and age, it just seems like almost everything comes to light, which of course we don't know about those things that never come to light. But I would think that Urban Meyer's motivation was he can get all sorts of coaches. There are better coaches out there than Zach Smith. There are as good a coaches out there as Zach Smith. So the motivation was not, I need this guy. The motivation had to be loyalty. Misguided loyalty, as many have said in the live chat. but had to be loyalty. He's Urban Meyer. He's winning at Ohio State. Actually, if he would have turned in Zach Smith, he would have been applauded by most, if not just about everyone, for saying he's calling out this issue. He's calling out a violator on his own staff. He's turning him in. He gave him other chances. He tried to work with him previously. And so I would think the sympathetic lean would go toward Urban Meyer had he fired Zach Smith back in 2015 or before that, or never hired him, but certainly made that move of firing him. He would have been applauded. The NCAA would have done nothing. Nothing would have been done legally, except in a private matter with the Smiths. And Urban Meyer would continue to win at Ohio State. So it's got to be a loyalty decision. Misguided as it was, because Urban Meyer had nothing to gain from this. He only had all of this to lose. All right. Well, I don't see you ever getting fired from your live stream. I'd be sad if Mark got fired from his live stream. Appreciate that. All right. So for every fast food worker that gets abused, y'all are saying that manager should be fired if he knew. Well, I can speak to what would be expected of me at my job, and I won't go into that. But yes, there are certain expectations, especially in this world, in this day and age, that weren't necessarily expected at earlier times in our history. Mark, I know it's very early, but what do you think Ohio State will do with this situation? This is what I'm thinking, and many of you guys joined the chat a little bit late. I tried to fire it up and then kind of hang out to let you guys kind of catch up so I wouldn't be giving my opinion right out of the gate, and many would miss. But of course, if you missed the beginning of the live stream, please, as soon as it posts, just go back and watch the beginning. I tried to fluff it up and talk other matters, Mark Rogers TV matters right off the top, to give you guys some time to jump in and so that I could address it, because I believe I did that. Courtney Smith told assistant coaches at Ohio State, but most notably, she told Shelley Meyer. This is verified on text messages, apparently. Shelley Meyer said that she would tell Urban, and even though, as Buckeyes State Sports pointed out, it wasn't verified that she did, in fact, go through with it, she did say that she would in the text messages. That would look to me as a smoking gun. The man's wife said to the victim that I am going to tell my husband, and he runs the whole deal, and he controls this guy's job. I think that's your answer right there. I think he's gone. Based on that, maybe we'll find out some other things. Maybe there's an angle that I'm not thinking of, but I think it's that simple. And I am sure that the Ohio State administration and athletic department, Gene Smith at the top as athletic director, are doing everything they can think of, everything, pulling any resource, any angle to dismiss this or explain it. Obviously, the guy's 73-8. He's won 3 national championships total. He is the third best winning percentage in the history of college football. He is the best winning percentage in modern college football. You have to go back to the black and white photos of the 1930s to find a guy who has been more successful winning games week to week at 4 programs and 3 major programs and 2 power programs, Florida and Ohio State. So I know many detractors point to Urban Meyer's failings in a few big games and his inability in the last few years to keep up with Nick Saban. Fine, if you're going to make that the standard. but he is basically almost went step for step with Nick Saban for a number of years. And so this is a monumental, this is a paramount, this is a, on the flip side, catastrophic day at Ohio State if all goes as it appears. And maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'm missing something again. Let me know if I am, and maybe there's more that Ohio State will be able to do in regards to explaining the situation. But if it can't be explained past what we just reviewed, the A plus the B equals C, then I don't know that they can keep Urban Meyer, because even though Colton had an interesting mid-discipline in a suspension because of the severity in terms of people being harmed, a young lady being harmed, Courtney Smith, this severity of this being a legal matter, not a recruiting violation, not paying money to kids so they can come to the school, or covering up grades so they can stay eligible, or getting strippers for them, or whatever happens with some of this recruiting. This is a matter that is a legal matter. Okay. Sean Nicholson, it's just the bad coaches. No one cares enough to sniff out their dirty laundry. Urban, fire the guy. Get over yourselves, OSU haters. Yes, he did fire the guy. So, maybe Thomas, you make a good point, and it's an obvious point. He did fire him last week. So, if he would have kept him and said, we didn't know about the incident from 2015. I didn't know about it. And nothing happened since. And we've gotten him help, whatever. I got him help based on the incidents previously that I knew about, but I didn't know about this 2015 incident. And Urban Meyer did state that they had received counseling based much on his direction going back to 2009. That if he says, I fired him, we took care of it. Oh, I didn't know about that incident. Oh, yes, I did. Here's the proof. But I still fired him. I just lied. We know coaches that still have their jobs that have lied countless times. But if the end result is that the person, Zach Smith, is no longer employed because of Urban Meyer, regardless of how difficult, even if it was forced upon him to make that decision, the result is that he did fire Zach Smith. So it's an interesting point that Navy Thomas makes right there. He only was fired because it was catching way too much heat, and Urban wants to keep his job. Okay, let's understand something, though. And Big Bubba Blue, I believe you're a Michigan fan. That shouldn't have anything to do with it, but just taking note of that. When does anyone in a place of power, when does anyone, period, come out and say publicly, this happened 3 years ago, nobody knows about it, nobody has caught wind of it, it's completely covered, but I feel bad about it, I feel guilty, I should have done the right thing then. Therefore, I'm going to do the right thing now, and I'm going to confess, or I'm going to turn this person in, or I'm going to provide relief for this person. That's never done. It would be a breath of fresh air if somebody would admit to something that has yet to be caught. That doesn't happen ever with anyone. Big Bubba Blue wants Urban to stay so Jimmy can beat him. Colton, if is about a staff member hitting a woman, yes. Okay, Brian McBride, we've not heard from you. Brian, welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, where we typically like to talk about more levity, little lighter matters on the field. I don't see how you can give him points for firing him 3 years after finding out. Sean, you're missing America's ability to bend their morality right now. I think it's 50-50 Meyer makes it out. Who in Ohio wants to prosecute Meyer? And Bobby Bowden made it through some tough situations there at Florida State that seemed very, very damning. And he made it out. But again, did any of those involve legal issues? I think they did, but when we're talking about drugs or we're talking about money or we're talking about weapons, we're not talking about abuse against an individual, against a woman. All right. He only was fired because it was catching way too much heat. Yes, we caught that. Anything else I missed in the live stream? Assuming he did know about 2015 before we did. Should have fired him at Florida. Okay, Colton, we do understand that based on the information I had, that there was an incident in 2009 at Florida, and they were newly married, Zach Smith and Courtney Smith. Urban Meyer knew about it, knew about the incident, reprimanded Zach Smith, or at least got him counseling. It was made public record. It was on public record, and Urban Meyer addressed it, and it was addressed in that fashion. And for a first known offense, I think that would be the proper way to handle that and not just say, you're fired, you're gone. The only issue is he fired in 3 years late. Okay. I love how most of the coaches that are super good. Yes, we already read that. Navy Thomas, wow, this never happens in the SEC. It's funny, I had a conversation last week with Sonny Dykes at SMU during American Conference Media Days, and then we talked afterwards because we've spoken and had 3 interviews here at Mark Rogers TV when Sonny Dykes was at Cal, and he was just mentioning and asking me about my background and my work stops and where I grew up. And once I mentioned covering the SEC, and we were talking some other things and some other obligations and responsibilities of a head coach, and it was a nice little conversation. But as soon as I mentioned, primarily because of where we were located, covering Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama in the mid to late 90s into the early 2000s, and covering NCAA violations, he said, "Yeah, that was quite the deal in the SEC, especially at the time, because that's what it was. It was constant." Too bad 28. If Meyer is only suspended, this would continue to stay in the media once upon his return. Not the best look for the program or university long term. Yeah, and that's what makes it such a difficult decision for Gene Smith and the Ohio State administration. It's not like Rich Rodriguez last year with some of the stupid things that he did and the misconduct that he did when Arizona, sure, they improved last year, but not to the expectations of the administration and the athletic department. And then when they had that slide late season, they really didn't like where the program was headed, weren't that satisfied with Rich Rodriguez effort on the field. And so they let him go, and they could point to the misconduct, even though there is much reported that from a football standpoint, they weren't happy. This would be a completely different deal. So, yes, replacements. A few people brought up not specific replacements, but the difficulty, just the difficulty that that Ohio State would have in replacing Urban Meyer. Arguably the best coach in the country. Certainly his track record is top 2, and his current track record, considering what Kirby Smart's doing and Dabo Swinney, is top 4. But all time, it's top 4 or 5. All right. Buckeye State Sports mentions the loyalty to Earl Bruce. It being a family matter. And if you know anything about Urban Meyer's coaching development and beginnings, he held Earl Bruce in the highest of regard, starting out as a graduate assistant at Ohio State during the Earl Bruce era. All right. I would like to remind everyone that for the next, let's say, 5 days, I've got a phone line here, 860-400-5696. And so you can call during the show, during the live stream here, and I will take your calls, and we will have a full-fledged call-in show. Now, when I say I've got this for the next 5 days, that doesn't mean we're not committed to a call-in show long-term. That just means for this particular app, I'm trying it out and would actually like to try it out by having one of you call as the call-in show. I apologize that I don't have the graphic to show you, but it's 860-400-5696. I will put that in the chat. Call in is 860-400-5696. I am committed to doing a call-in show long term. I'm just trying to find the best software and application to do it. And right now it's just a secondary line that's kind of a fake phone number of sorts that calls through to my cell phone. And once again, it's 860-400-5696. Also want to remind everyone, as I stated for the first time in our previous live stream, that I am taking email addresses. I'm not going to abuse them. You're not going to get junk mail from me. You're not going to get hounded by me. You're going to receive, starting the first week of the football season, you're going to receive a mailing from me once a week, one time a week. And it's going to be providing just a little bit more information that's unique to the mailing list. And just additional content, perspective, a specific take on something, a little bit more insight into what we have here at Mark Rogers TV. So I'm taking a call right now. All right, so this is exciting. This is our first call in to Mark Rogers TV. Who am I speaking with? Apparently somebody who got a bit gun shy. All right. So anyway, that knocked me off my live stream for a second here. Let me get back in play. There we go. So this may not be the phone application that I need. It may be faulty, may not be the best route. The best route is to go through the software and do it there. So I know you guys want to talk college football and Urban Meyer in particular. Just wanted to take a quick timeout to let you know that for the next 5 days, I do have a phone line that somebody apparently just called, 860-400-5696. Here comes the call again. Caller 2 to decline. Yes, this is Mark Rogers TV. Who am I speaking with? So we're having issues with that for some reason. It seems like somebody's, if I'm just calling for the calls right now, making the solicitation that if somebody's calling right now, this is pretty legit, but for whatever reason, it's not going through. All right. So we continue trial and error with the call-in show. Here it goes one more time. Let me see if I can grab this. Caller 2 to decline. The call will start at the beep. Hey, this is Mark Rogers TV. You're a first caller ever. Who am I speaking with?
It's the great NTA, baby.
The great NTA. Absolutely. Is that your handle?
It's just short for Navy Thomas 8.
Oh, it is very appropriate that you are the first caller ever, Navy Thomas 8. That's exceptional.
I just wanted to try and help you out on this.
Sure, absolutely.
This whole thing is a huge fiasco, in my opinion.
Okay.
I mean, I can go back to 1995 with Tom Osborne.
Yep.
And he kept Lawrence Phillips who eventually died in prison.
Yep.
But that's all right. But he allowed him to play in the Florida game.
Yes, I remember that.
So if we take today's standards and move it back to then, well, then the greatest coach in the history of college football should be fired, right?
So I'm trying to make...
How many coaches do we go through that have tried to stick up for their subordinates?
Yep.
The whole thing just totally pisses me off.
Well, I'm trying to process this from a few different ways. So I'm not necessarily saying that he should be fired or should not be fired. There's the question of, do you personally think, or do the viewers, or do I personally think he should be fired or not be fired? Then there's also the question, do we think he's going to be fired, regardless of what we feel or what we would do based on the evidence, what we know of the environment, the culture, what's being done these days, not in 1995, 23 years ago. Do we think he's going to be fired? And trying to sort through all this, not knowing everything behind the scenes, it's a complicated process.
You know who's going to decide this?
Hopefully not public opinion.
It's going to be Jim Delaney.
Jim Delaney.
After what they went through with Penn State,
this
is not good for the Big Ten.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jim Delaney has always fancied himself as being above board, more so than his colleagues in the other conferences, and wanting the Big Ten to hold a higher social and academic standard than other conferences. He's been pretty clear about that. So I could agree with you on that he may take charge of this situation to a certain extent, although I don't think he technically can make the move, but he can put a lot of pressure on.
Agreed. I agree. Well, anyway, I just wanted to call in and give your system the test.
That was the test right there.
You should be able to get it pretty much figured out.
Now, folks, Navy Thomas 8 and I connected on YouTube, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. We lose track of time. But he helps me out with all sorts of suggestions on content and leads me to certain facts and articles that lead me to some things that I should be covering. And he's just a great supporter. So Navy Thomas 8, I appreciate it. How's your channel doing?
Oh, it's doing all right.
Yeah?
Just haven't been posting a lot lately.
Okay. All right. I certainly had more than a chuckle a few years ago when you let me know that you had mentioned me on one of your posts and you were just tearing it up down the street on your motorcycle, and you were talking about something that I was discussing on Mark Rogers TV. It was pretty funny.
I might just do one of those today on this very damn subject.
Okay. I would love to hear it, because when I go on here, I want to be prepared, and I typically am concerning football matters. I knew this was too important to let it slide, but at the same time, I don't want to be judge and jury. I just want to try to read the facts, give context to the story, and then just kind of let you guys talk. And then I'm just sitting up here kind of, I'm not prepared. It's not like I thought about this for an hour and then came up with talking points and conclusions. So it's all off the cuff, and I just thought I would open it up as a forum here to discuss this matter and what should happen or what could happen.
I totally understand that. I really enjoy the chat section of your videos.
Yeah.
Because you can go off on a tangent and start talking about something, and the chat room, we'll conduct our own conversations. And I love all the guys in there, especially NCIS. Even though he's a Buckeye fan.
That's right.
We're going to see when Nebraska puts the thumping this year on Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State.
You heard it here first. So Navy Thomas A told me this the other day, I believe, on Twitter, and he's backed it up right here that he's calling out those three monster programs in the Big Ten East that Scott Frost is coming after him this year, not in 2 years, this year.
So that's about all I got to say, other than go Big Red and throw the bones, baby.
NT8. Appreciate that, sir. Thanks for your service to our country. We'll talk to you later.
Yes, sir. All right. Goodbye.
All right. The phone line works. Navy Thomas 8. Very appropriate, as it would be with a number of you if you would have been the first caller in. And that's how we're going to do it to start, at least, is just hold the phone up to the mic. I actually, a credit to Uncle Lou. I said, how are you doing the call-ins? Because I see a number of ways that you can do it legitimately through software and through Skype and taking calls. Said, I just take the cell phone, I set up a different number, boom, I hold it up to a mic, and there you go. And I said, hey, that's the way I've done it. As you guys have seen many times when people can't connect via video, and especially a lot of analysts like a Jerry DiNardo or Glenn Mason recently are on the road and they just want to talk on their phone. That's what I do. All right. Is there anything else we can address with this situation? Anything I've missed? All right. Of course, the comparisons have been made to Penn State. Navy Thomas 8 made an interesting one to Tom Osborne. That situation slipped my mind, but as soon as he mentioned it, I remember it very well. Lawrence Phillips, 1995, Florida National Championship game at the Fiesta Bowl. And now I can't say I remember exactly what Lawrence Phillips was involved in. I believe it was drugs. Don't know if it was anything else in particular right there. All right, folks. So here it is. Colton, appreciate that. Paul Feinbaum 2.0, 860-400-5696. Would love to throw that up there, but I've got all sorts of paraphernalia here. But I'll get that on the big board, as I believe I'm going to have to do during my previews and predictions. So I've seen previews and predictions from a number of people online, and they do what they do, which is fine. I tend to go a little bit more in depth. So I'm really talking about personnel across the board. I'm breaking down each level of the defense and the offense and talking special teams and the schedule. And it's just going to be way too much for you guys to take in 10 or 12 minutes. So I think I'm going to have to throw up the big board with maybe key returning starters or metrics. I'm really crediting Bill Conley from SB Nation. I've looked through his previews to gain the advanced metrics on these teams, which go way beyond and are much more intricate and specified and accurate beyond just the total offense and defense numbers, the advanced metrics to try to make my predictions. I'm feeling a little pressure, I've got to admit, in making my predictions this year because I wanted them to be on the money. Now, 2 years ago, I did predict Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington to go to the college football playoff. So I was 4 for 4. Last year, I was 2 for 4 with Alabama and Clemson. I had Ohio State and Oklahoma State. I should have went with the chalk and Oklahoma, but I went Oklahoma State, Ohio State. Of course, the Buckeyes could have been in the playoff, but had they been, Alabama would not have been in the playoff. So I still would have been 2 out of 4. But as I've stated many times in recent weeks, I am bothered by the chalk that is presenting itself in college football with Clemson, Miami in the ACC, Alabama, Georgia in the SEC, Ohio State, Wisconsin in the Big Ten. And maybe we've got a blow up there that could change a whole lot of stuff. We could have Luke Fickell 2.0 at Ohio State in 2018. Of course, Luke Fickell had to take over the program post Jim Tressel in 2011, and Ohio State went 6-7. I think I could stand on the sideline this fall, and Ohio State would not go 6-7. So, but it could be the difference between winning the Big Ten and going to the playoff and finishing 3rd in the East and going 9-3. Could be. All right. Accused. Did she leave him timetable and knowing Urban's future. Multiple wives don't leave if beaten, especially if they're rich. All right. So you guys are having a great time with the live chat. I can't dive into all those aspects of it right now because you guys are carrying on your own conversation, and that's what the live chat is for. So I try to dive into the live chat so I give you guys some response because many of you guys have questions and comments specifically for me, and I don't want to miss those. But I love it that you guys have your own conversations and talk up college football. And of course, this is a huge one. And yes, Colton, excellent point. I didn't go there quite yet. Ohio State has 2 former head coaches on its current staff. You would think Greg Schiano would be the first one in line to take over if Urban is cut loose. I don't know how Fickle went 6-6. That team was talented as well. It was a difficult situation. He was not prepared for the job. He was a defensive guy at the time, a defensive coordinator. Of course, he's got the job at Cincinnati right now and went 4-8, but should do much better at UC going forward. That 2011 Ohio State team also lost 5 of those 6 games by less than a touchdown. Very, very, very close games. And then in the bowl game against Florida, the same thing. They lost 24-17 with Braxton Miller at quarterback, who was just a true freshman at the time and didn't even start at the beginning of the season. That was Joe Bosserman, who was, yes, I will declare it right now, the worst modern-day Ohio State quarterback ever. All right. You're right to question the chalk mark. All teams have weaknesses and question marks. We're willing to critically examine them. And I'm trying to do that right now. I'm looking at Utah possibly breaking up the Pac-12 South and winning that division. I think Utah has the best team, not the best talent as USC does, but the best team prepared to win this season. What's making me reluctant to pull the trigger on Utah is that they play the most difficult schedule inside the Pac-12. Not overall. I don't have them ranked as the number 1 schedule in the Pac-12 among Pac-12 teams, because they don't play anyone outside the conference, excluding BYU. And that's really nothing. But Utah has the most difficult schedule in the Pac-12, period, because they've got to play all 3 difficult teams in the North in Stanford, Washington, and Oregon. But I'm close to pulling the trigger on Utah winning the Pac-12 South, Texas in the Big 12, and maybe somebody other, even before this Urban Meyer news, somebody other than Ohio State in the Big 10. Michigan, boy, they are a wild card. I see where they could just be the same Michigan, lose 3 or 4 games, or this could be the breakout. This could be the big breakout. All right, Cincinnati has some great coaches go through there. They have Brian Kelly, Tommy Tuberville come to mind first and foremost. All right. Should Florida be thanking Meyer for pulling headlines away from them? Arizona, USC are better than Utah. I don't believe so, Colton. You might be right. I think it's close. All right. Again, I'm going to keep up the live chat for a minute or 2 unless you guys go in another direction. I think we've beaten the Urban Meyer story to death unless something new comes out. The number for the phone line right here. Call me and we'll talk some college football. 860-400-5696. 860-400-5696. And we do know that the line works because Navy Thomas got through. I just had to punch 1. And so before I was able to hit the speakerphone, that's what it was asking me to do, and I didn't hear it the first 2 times. There's the phone number right there, 860-400-5696. Too bad 28. I love it, Mark. Look deeper than the surface and ignore the easy chalk. I could not believe, for any of you that missed the live stream last time, that when I looked at 2016 win totals translated to 2017, that there were 22 or 23 teams in the Power 5 and the major independents out of 68. More than 1/3 of them, this shocked me. More than 1/3 of them increased or decreased from 2016 to 17 by at least 3 wins. Michigan State, the classic example, from 3-9 to 9-3 in the regular season, 10-3 with a bowl win. I thought, because I'm seeing these predictions come out by a lot of people, and they are predicting exactly what you would expect. Ohio State 11-1, Penn State 10-2, Michigan State 10-2 or 9-3 on down the line. Wisconsin 11-1, Iowa 9-3, and through all the conferences, right in line with the Football Power Index, which is a predictor of games. But of course, it's a predictor of games in terms of what's expected and what is the chalk. And I hate to keep using that term, but what the expectation is. And we know that there are going to be exceptions to that expectation. And that's what I'm trying to figure out, where those aberrations are going to occur, where those teams are going to decline or rise significantly, because it happened 23 times last year. Oregon State went from 5 wins to 1. Oregon went from 4 wins to 7. Arizona went from 3 to 7. There was one more in the Pac-12. Colorado went from 10 to 5. Nebraska went from 9 to 4. Michigan State from 3 to 10. Minnesota went from 9 wins to 5. So again, there were 23 teams in the country that either increased or decreased their wins by 3 or more. And when I look at the predictions that I see across the board, nobody is varying off of what the expectations are. That Clemson's going to go 12-0 or 11-1. Then Florida State's going to go 9-3. Then NC State and Louisville are going to go 7-5 or 8-4. Then Boston College is going to go 7-5. Boom, 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 down the line. Miami's going to go 11-1 or 10-2. Virginia Tech's going to go 8-4. Boom, 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 down the line. We know that that's not necessarily going to happen, because 23 times last year, somebody improved a ton or declined a ton. Now at the very, very tippy top, especially if Urban Meyer keeps his job, the Blue Bloods may play into the college football playoff as expected. Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, or Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, or something like that, Washington included. We have about 6 or 7 teams in the Power 5 that are expected to make the playoff. 4 of those 7 or 8. It's basically Ohio State, Clemson, Miami. It's basically Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, Washington, Oklahoma. And then the second tier consideration would be Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Miami, West Virginia. A lot of people like Texas. And that's it. Almost everybody has Washington out of the Pac-12 if they make the college football playoff, which I think is going to be determined by the Auburn game in week 1. If they lose that, unless they sweep the Pac-12 and get help elsewhere, that's going to look bad on the Pac-12 coming off of what we had last season. All right, Nebraska makes a bowl game and wins. 10-2 Missouri, 11-1 Mississippi State. Now that's what I'm looking for right there. 10-2 Missouri. I've done complete SEC and Big Ten predictions so far. My biggest difference was a 6-6 Northwestern. They have a very tough schedule. So I know that you guys have only seen my posts all the way up to schedule number 50, which is Vanderbilt, but I've actually gone all the way down through number 13. I've recorded all these. I just need to post them, and I'm not going to obliterate you with 30 or 40 teams at once. So every several hours, I release another one. But I have gone all the way down to number 13, and I've got Northwestern rated extremely high in terms of schedule difficulty. Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame, Duke. I'm missing someone else in there. Yeah, Northwestern could take a tumble from their 10-win 2017. 5-7 LSU would be a good example of that happening. Arizona 11-1. Colton, you love Arizona. You love the Cats. Bear down. I have Northwestern beating Michigan. 11-1 Penn State isn't that weird, but their loss for me was at Pitt. Could be interesting. Certainly happened 2 years ago. Then they rallied to go 10-2. Yeah, lost to Pitt, lost to Michigan, annihilated by Michigan, then ran the table, beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten East, and won the Big Ten championship. So it's happened before. All right, everyone, I appreciate it. Nate Howell joining us with the Big Ten, the number 1 conference, the SEC 2, and the Pac-12 at number 3. Not the ACC, Nate. The ACC at number 3. And that's something that I do each and every offseason. For those who have only been watching for a few months, I rate all the conferences based on the Power 5 results at the end of the season. So look forward to that after the bowl games and after the national championship game, in which I take all the results from all the games in the Power 5 and I see the teams. So not every game is weighted the same, and I rank the conferences. I give a metric to it. So I could never begin to thank or acknowledge or credit all of you. You know who you are. Thank you for supporting Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. For those people out there that love college football in your realm of influence, family, friends, Facebook acquaintances, let them know we're here and we are getting you set for the 2018 season with currently scheduled rankings. I don't know how many of you, and I've said this before, are really into the schedule rankings. I should have done them a long time ago. And next off season, I will. That will be a January/February project, because that's when we need to talk schedules and rank the schedules. But as soon as those are released, I will have previews and predictions on every team in the Power 5. Plus, I have guests coming back in just a few weeks. As soon as we have news from camp across the nation, we will have the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers on to talk their specific teams and get you set for 2018. We are just about 4 weeks away, and I can't wait. It'll be Thursday night in 4 weeks. Thursday night, tomorrow night, 4 weeks, Northwestern, Purdue. I'm excited for a Big Ten opener that means something, and a few other games on Thursday and Friday before we hit Saturday, Sunday, and Monday with the likes of Michigan, Notre Dame, LSU, Miami, and Florida State, Virginia Tech. Thanks so much. Again, like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us immensely with driving this and driving the content and getting you better and better content and being able to do this more often than we currently can. So I appreciate it. Get the family and friends on board as well. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We will see you next time.